let's get this bread. Welcome back to the second installment of Reviewing Your Stories. I have 10 amazing stories to read for you today. I'm not going to do quite all the disclaimers that I did in my last Reviewing Your Stories video because hopefully you guys have seen that one. Basically, first of all, these are my opinions. Of course, if you don't agree with my criticism, that's totally cool. Before we begin, I would of course like to thank all the people who submitted to this video. You guys are so brave. I'm not even sure if I could do it. Thank you guys so much for submitting. It was so awesome reading your stories, and they were all really, really good. Like, I think all of them could become published stories if you, of course, work hard enough and make changes to them. If you submitted them by email, you'll be getting a full Word doc of all of my suggestions and comments. If you submitted over Wattpad, I can't copy your story onto a Word doc and then tell you what edits I would make, because Wattpad does not let you do that. I will be sending you a Word doc that lists everything I would do. Hopefully you can work out which line or paragraph I'm talking about. If you can't, just let me know. I will tell you. So the first one is from my friend. We've known each other since we were born, basically, and so he decided to give me his writing. Thank you so much. You can go check his YouTube channel out at this link here. You can also go to his Instagram under the same name. I don't actually know if this book has a title. I know that it is based on a movie. Actually, it's kind of a spin-off of a movie. I forgot the name of that movie, but I'm gonna put it right here. So let's read the first line. I went to the water to die. That's a pretty bomb-ass first line. Okay, let's be real here. Like, that's pretty dope. I'm hooked. I love it. So let's talk about the good points of the story. First of all, the first line was great. Second of all, I really loved the characters. I thought that them and the plot was just super, super interesting. So this book is about a girl who becomes a vampire. In chapters 1 and 2, she's talking about like the love of her life, this girl who she's not allowed to see anymore, and then in the second chapter, she goes to this woman's house, and then in the third chapter, she wakes up underground, buried alive. She's a vampire now. And so I was like, ooh. So it was just super interesting, and I felt like your characters were really cohesive. You really gave some good details about the characters, so they seemed like real people. You also had a lot of beautiful lines. Let me find one for you. The voice sounded similar, but it was oddly sweet, honey-like. At first it seemed like liquid honey, dripping with enticing sweetness. It was almost childlike in its innocence. But as the voice continued, the honey seemed to harden, begin to crack, revealing hints of impatience underneath. So yeah, beautifully written sentences, as well as like awesome sentences of gore. Like when the young vampire is like eating that dude's face. I thought it was enjoyable because of how well it was described, and I was like, ew. But also, a few things that I would change about this, first of all, is the pacing. I feel like you can definitely stretch some of the events that happened out further, because sometimes it moved a little too fast and I kind of got left behind. I feel like in certain places you can slow it down a bit, you know? Take it easy. Also, the first line of the book, I went to the water to die, is awesome. The second line is, my name is Lily. And I'm not a huge fan of my name is. I don't think it's needed. I think you can just move on to the second sentence. The only other thing I would really change about it is the doubled words that you use a lot. You know, you'll use the same word in two sentences that follow one another, such as down here you say confiscated a book, following sentence confiscated my books. And so by using the similar phrasing or similar words, you're just kind of repeating yourself. It'll sound a lot more interesting if you use, you know, instead of confiscate, you know, took or something. I can't really think of synonyms right off the top of my head. You know what I mean? You can look it up online, like confiscate synonyms, and find something. But this story was really awesome, and I love gore, so excellent job there. So my second submission is actually from another one of my friends. Her name is Mabel. She's super great. She doesn't want anyone like following her social media or anything, but I'm still gonna review her story because I think it's great. And if you want to read it, reach out to me and I will give it to you without asking for her permission. I'm just kidding, of course I would. I don't know what the name of this story is. I think the name of the story is James Gardiner. I don't actually know if that's the name of the story or not. Sorry, friend. So let's read the first paragraph of Mabel's story. James knew something was wrong the moment he got to school. As he walked by the main office on the way to class, he saw the principal talking to the counselor by the counselor's desk. They looked very serious, and James heard them say the word evacuate. He He had heard that word from Sandra when she was doing a project on hurricanes and had rehearsed her presentation for him, pretending he was her teacher. The images from Sandra's shiny blue poster flashed through his mind. They had been of wrecked houses and sinking cities. He started to run to his classroom. So what I really liked about the story was the opener that I just read for you, and like the premise. Because once again, it happens in a school, which, you know, is kind of a cliche place to put it, but immediately you hear them say the word evacuate and you're like, oh, this is not a normal school day. The second thing I really liked is the childlike descriptions, because this is from the point of view of a child and it shows. Wait, that sounded really bad. That sounded like I was calling your book childlike writing. This is not childlike writing, it's childlike thoughts. No, the writing is really great. I'm not bitching on the writing here. Let me give an example of what I mean by childlike thoughts. James knew that Conrad High was a big high school just a few blocks away. He knew he would probably go there when he was old enough to go to high school. But he didn't want to go now. He pictured himself sitting in a big desk that he could barely see over, listening to kids who were almost grown-ups talking about things he didn't understand. They were all looking at him, expecting him to answer some question, but he didn't know because he had never been to high school. His stomach churned and tossed at the thought. Surely they wouldn't actually be expected to learn with the older kids, he thought, as they got their backpacks and lined up to leave. The mix of like mature writing with the mentality of a child is really interesting, really unique to the story. The third thing that I loved about your story was the dialogue. The story is so like based around the interactions of these children. So of course the dialogue is going to be really important. And it sounded like children were talking to each other. Not only that, but the dialogue of every single character was different. The way that their relationship in this chapter progressed as they became friends, you didn't have to say, I think Candace is my friend now. Like, no, you could see it through the dialogue, which was really nice. So some of the things that I think could be improved, because once again, no story is perfect. First of all, I feel like you could name the people at the beginning. You're talking about the principal, the principal, the teacher, and the counselor. And it kind of sounds generic, so I think by giving them names or saying like, the big man who sat behind the desk, because, you know, that's how a child would think about it, make them a lot more distinctive to your story. Second of all, just being more specific. Don't get me wrong, there were a lot of good specifics in this story, especially when it came to like his artwork and the gym that they were sitting in. However, I feel like more could be added, especially at the beginning, when he's entering the school, running to class. I feel like more specifics would be really great. And third, and I know this is not a great critique, because I don't read realistic fiction that much that doesn't have death, blood, and gore, or like unicorns. I don't really know what to do with myself, but I feel like I don't really understand the plot of this. I haven't seen the rest of the story, so if this is more of a character-based story and it's about their relationship, you did develop their relationship, which was great. If that's the goal of your story. But if the goal of your story is a bigger plot that's coming, maybe introduce it in this. So the next up is Bookstantinople. I think that's how you say it. Bookstantinople is on YouTube and Twitter. You can follow them here at this handle on both sites. So this story is called The Fox. I don't actually know if this is a short story or part of something longer. It would probably work as either, but he didn't really specify. So let's read the first paragraph. I've begun to feel tired of expectancies. I looked into Bronas. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce words. That was my other disclaimer I forgot to give. I can't pronounce things. So if I pronounce your name wrong or a word in your story, that's just me. My bad. I looked into Bronon's dull eyes and I wondered what exactly she expected from me. Cows are a creature of habit. I suppose she knew what to expect. She returned to her favorite grazing spot, unaware of the state of my mind. So there were a lot of excellent things about this story. First of all, you gave such excellent exposition without it being info dumpy. I knew who this guy was, I knew about his whole family, his family history. It was woven into what he was doing and the people he was talking to. It was very well done. Second of all, the writing itself was just really good. You had so many beautifully crafted sentences and thoughts. I'll give an example of one that was my favorite line of the story. I'm sorry I'm so upset on your birthday, Granddad. His tears stained his face. I felt the uncomfortable squirm in the back of my throat, the squirm that was supposedly beaten out of me when they taught me to be a man. Wow, that sentence just like hit so hard because it says so much without saying anything at all. You're not saying like, society told him that he had to be a man and tough and couldn't cry. Like, you didn't say that, but you said that. The third great thing about the story was the character development. Like, you gave such great character development of this MC in just 4 pages. You know, he's kind of thinking about his life and his legacy, and he's thinking about what he wants his son and his grandson to think about him and to do with their own lives. And that came across very well, especially in his short little conversation with his grandson. You could see how he just wanted the best for his grandson, and it was really sweet. If I was going to give critiques on this, first of all, I was wondering exactly what the point of it was, just because if it is some part of something bigger, I'm sure that that will be explained. If it's not part of something bigger, if it's just on its own, it's a good snapshot of a guy's life, which I understand is some people's like purpose in creating short stories. However, I was wondering, you know, why it stopped when it did, why it started when it did. It kind of felt like it just chopped off. There wasn't really, I don't feel like a climax of any kind or any resolution to it. So I understand that maybe that's the style you're going for. I personally was thinking, why did it end here? Why don't we get just a couple more lines of resolution? My only other critique would be on the sentence structure. I feel like in some places it's too choppy. Like, I know that short sentences are great, but sometimes I felt like there were too many short sentences in a row. You really needed some longer sentences in there for variety. So yeah, awesome story. I cannot believe that you fit so much into, I keep on saying 4 pages, but really it's 3 pages and a little tiny half paragraph. So hats off to you, sir. So my next submission is from Connor Wisteria. I think I'm saying that right. He has a Wattpad account. You should go follow it right here. So this story that he sent me, I don't really know what the title of it is. He sent me chapter 6 of it. So let's read the first paragraph. The trail that Mother had left behind wasn't easy to follow, but every time they'd started to question their direction, they'd spot a hint of crimson smeared across a bit of brick, metal, or canvas, suggesting her path. It was like she ultimately wanted them to find her, and these breadcrumbs were left behind to show her children to her one last time. I really, really enjoyed this story. I thought at first that they were going to try to rescue their mother because maybe she was delusional or something. Turns out they're going to kill their mother, which was just a total mind blown. I really enjoy stories with death, if I haven't said that enough. That's the first thing I loved about this story, was it was so entertaining. I shouldn't say this because, you know, I am an author tuber, I do write, and I do love reading. There are some books that I have to read a couple pages, set it down, come back to it the next day. That happens with a fair number of books that I read. However, this one, I wanted to keep on reading. I mean, I wanted to know if they could kill their mother. I genuinely wanted to know. I felt like the action was well described, like I knew what was going on. I could see both of them rolling around on the ground next to the train platform, wrestling each other. That was great. Also, your pacing was on point. I never got bored. You took the time to describe what was going on in their surroundings, where they were, but and how the society worked, the security cameras and everything they could pick up on their faces, but you also didn't overly describe. The plot kept moving at the same time, so it's very hard to nail pacing. I struggle with nailing pacing all the time, so good job there. I'm gonna read one of the lines that I really like. For the first time since they'd spotted her, Mother roused and started to look at her surroundings. Maybe she was just checking for arrival times, but as her gaze raked over where her daughter stood, Erin imagined that whatever sense or connection mothers were supposed to have with their children might finally be kicking in just in time to ruin their plan. Once again, that was awesome. She just straight up roasted her mother and said, like, this bitch ain't a mother. So let's talk about some of the things that I would improve with this. I think you should make it clear who's speaking. I mean, and by that I mean who has control of the perspective. I know that this is a chapter 6, and so it's probably introduced a lot earlier that both siblings have control of the perspective. And I was confused at first as to who the siblings were, who these other names they were saying were, where they were. There's just a lot of information. So all the information started falling into place over time, but it took a while for me to figure that out. So I'm not saying that you need to change that per se because this is a chapter 6. However, make sure that in chapter 1, you're making that clear. If you start chapter 1 like you started chapter 6, your readers are probably going to be lost. Another thing is just to make sure you're not using too many pronouns so that we don't know who's they're talking about. You know, there were sometimes there and she and he would kind of get messy. Just make sure that you're using their names enough and not just the pronouns. And also, I know that this is also not a critique about the actual writing that you sent me. It's a critique about the larger book, but I noticed you sent me chapter 6. And I think that if you clarified some things at the beginning, this could be a chapter 1. This is a pretty awesome start. 2 kids trying to kill their mother. I mean, I would pick up a book and read it. So just make sure that your first 5 chapters are really essential to the story. Just make sure that you're starting at a good place. So the next 6 submissions are going to be Wattpad. So I'm going to put their handles up here, of course, with the title of their books. You should go follow all of them. I'm not going to say it every time I start a new story that you should go follow them. You should go follow all of these people. So let's get into it. So our 5th story is from Blue Room 19, and it's called Another World Celeste. So let us read the first paragraph. Actually, I'm going to kind of read 2. You'll see what. Ugh. I eternally groan while moving my body to the side. It's not a good sign to wake up with a massive headache. I don't remember what happened after I blacked out on the terrace while watching the meteor shower. My effort to remember anything afterwards makes the headache even worse. So let's talk about some of the great points of the story, because there were some definite great points. First of all, I love the bond between the wolf and the MC. So I read the chapter titled Beginning and then the actual chapter 1. And in chapter 1, the main character meets this wolf, the wolf that actually saves her in the beginning, and she has kind of this instant bond with the wolf. And I just thought it was really cute, you know, like her meeting this wolf and naming the wolf. And anyway, I also am kind of getting tired of stories that, you know, where there are coexisting worlds. One is fantasy, one is regular, and the MC switches back between the two. However, in this story, the MC dies in the regular world and then gets moved to the fantasy world, which was such a cool idea. I really enjoyed the premise of this, and the way that you explained it through the goddess was really cool. Also, your dialogue was great. I loved the dialogue, especially at the beginning when Celine was talking to Natsuki. I think I'm saying that right. That dialogue and the way that you folded information into it was just really good. That was the way you gave exposition, but it wasn't overly overbearing exposition. It was just wonderfully folded into the dialogue, and I thought your dialogue was great. So some of the things I'd like to see in the story, first of all, I think that she should react more to her dying, because she did just die. She did have some thoughts about her death. You know, she was thinking, I died in my 20s, I still have so much to do with my life, I've never had a boyfriend, I've never had this or that. That was all really good. However, I want to see her bodily reaction. Is she having a panic attack? You know, like I would be if I had died and woken up on this fantasy world. Is she, you know, does she start crying? There wasn't much external reaction to her own death. Second of all, there were a lot of grammar mistakes, so if you are going for publication here, I would definitely hire an editor. I tried to fix some of them, but there are a lot in here. My only other critique would be about the dream sequence in chapter 1. I'm not too big on dream sequences. It kind of sounded like the dream sequence was a vision of sorts. If the information she's learning from her vision comes into play later, then that would make sense. However, right now it just seems like some kind of recapping dream, and I'm not sure it adds that much to the story. So consider the role of the dream sequence, consider if you really need it, and then make that call. So let's read a little bit of this story. I'm going to read the end of the beginning chapter. When I gaze back at the sky once more, the sun is setting. The blue sky is fading to a yellow and pink hue. Just when I am about to leave this place, a shadow hovers over my head, and every hair on my body immediately stands up. I'm dead. I'm so dead. And that's cool because it's kind of a double meaning, you know, like she feels a shadow and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm dead. But she's also, you know, literally dead, so I thought that was interesting. So our next submission is Answering the Darkness by Blesky Bound. I think I'm saying that right. I don't really know. So in the description of the book, it says that this is some kind of spin-off or like addition, something like that, to another story, a book that I didn't know, so I will be judging this like as a standalone. So I'm going to read you guys the first line of the foreword. The world ended with a bright white flash. Everything fell silent. No engines, no singing birds, and no muttering. Then the screams erupted. So we're gonna do kind of one thing that I didn't like first, and then we'll get into the stuff that I liked. So the first thing I didn't really like about the story was the foreword. So I understand that you wanted to get the information out there, you know, that this is how the world ended. Her parents are not around anymore. She lives in this subway. The surface is not hospitable. However, I feel like that could have been done better. I feel like the foreword isn't 100% necessary. So yeah, I think honestly you could just dive right into chapter 1, because I really liked the start of chapter 1. I didn't like the start of the foreword as much, but I really, really liked chapter 1. So let's dive into chapter 1 and talk about all the great things in it. So first of all, I loved Clem and Kenny's relationship and the way that you described it. It was a cool mix because on the one hand he's being, you know, fatherly to her, but on the other hand, he's kind of, you know, telling her to shut up, and like, she's kind of his subordinate. It was really unique, and I really enjoyed reading about it. So this is just an example of their relationship. I know, Kenneth, it's the last time, I promise. And now shut up, I need to concentrate. I rudely interrupted his explanation. I knew how dangerous it could be to have a firearm that wouldn't shoot. A guy on the last perimeter guard had left his weapon in the secured mode, and all they had found were some drops of blood in his boots, with the rest of his feet still in them. And this brings me to the second thing I really loved about this book, which was the immediate danger that you put these characters in. I love me some danger. I love when you just kind of shove your characters into a scenario. And by showing, you know, talking about this guard whose feet were left in his boots, but everything else is gone, that's disgusting and creepy, and shows that they're in immediate danger here. But at the same time, they're still kind of bantering with each other. It's like they've come to accept this danger, which I think is really cool. And yeah, I like the way that you mixed the dark setting and the fact that, you know, they're fighting for survival with kind of the snarkiness and the comedy, because you did have some, you know, some comedic lines in here that I really loved. It was just a really awesome mix, and I think you did it really well. So the only other critique that I would give this piece is adverb usage. I struggle with it too. I'm going back through my old story, editing it right now actually, and man, oh man, did I use adverbs. So even in the part I just read, where it says, I rudely interrupted his explanation, you don't really need the word rudely. You can just say, I interrupted his explanation, and we're all going to understand that that was a little rude. So yeah, just eliminate the adverbs and eliminate maybe even the foreword to the book. But otherwise, this was amazing. I really enjoyed reading this. So our next story is New World by Silver F. Streak. So apart from Wattpad, you can also follow this author on her blog and on her Instagram, both of which I have here, but she's asked mainly for support on Wattpad because she doesn't do much on her blog. Let us read our first sentence here. Humans were a virus. That was a good first line, wasn't it? It was definitely true in my novel. As far as I was concerned, it was true in real life too. And the line set a good tone because Corvo would have that idea running through her head for most of the book. I could go on and write about how the humans had ravaged her homeworld over the years. That might be kind of boring though. What if I started with some action? So if you're wondering, the first line is a story within a story. So the main character is a cyborg. In the cyborg test, she has to give something creative to show that she's human, and she's writing a novel. At first I was a little like, what? Is it the author like describing their process for writing the book? But no, it's the character. So let's talk about some of the awesome things about the story. First of all, what a super unique opener. It took me aback, but in a good way. You know, I was like, what? And I had to keep reading for explanation on what exactly was going on, which was really good. While we're on the subject though, I'm gonna do one of the things that I might change about the story, even though I think it's really cool that she has to give a creative element for this test. I try to warn against making your MC an author because sometimes that can come across as cliche, and it can also come off as kind of being a self-insert. And yes, I understand that the MC of this book is a cyborg, so you know, it's not like you're 100% putting yourself in the story. However, I would show some of her other hobbies and interests just to make sure that author isn't the only thing that categorizes this narrator. So the second thing I really loved about this was the character descriptions. Every character was so unique. From the MC to her two brothers, the way you described the two new kids in school too were just, it was so great. Your characters were just so strong. And I love how I wrote down here, under great things about the story, cyborg shit. Yes, I do love the cyborg shit in here. Another one of the things that I didn't like too much about the story was the fact that it was in a school setting. I feel like that can sometimes come across as cliche. However, the fact that you put a cyborg in it, you know, a cyborg in a normal high school, that was super intriguing. I would maybe stray away from staying in the school for the first 4 chapters as the story is right now. I would think maybe go outside the school. So yeah, super strong writing, characters, everything. The only other thing I would change about this story, in the first chapter, the way that the tests are explained, like the cyborg test, what's it called? The PSLTs, like it was a super interesting idea. However, use several paragraphs to explain it and maybe fold that information in differently because it felt a little info dumpy. If you could find a different way to give that information, maybe in the debate about the PSLTs, maybe in some of the information written on the board, I think it would be an amazing improvement on the first chapter. To show how great the character descriptions were, I'm going to give you a description of one of the characters. Before he could open it, the door swung inward and a girl stepped through. Girl wasn't really the right word though. Olympic gymnast meets blonde Amazon warrior would have been more accurate. Her pink tank top and short shorts made her look like she was just about to go out running or maybe play some volleyball. Dress code infractions aside, it was her staff that made me look twice. When I say staff, I don't mean one of those mini staffs some girls stuck in their hair buns or whatever. I mean 6-foot-long silver pole with gold crystal ball on top. That was what I call bold, with a capital B. So our next story is Kingdom's Fury by Fish Out of Water 19. Let's read the first paragraph. Hundreds of shades of fabric covered the granite floor. Coral, opal, vermilion, even flaxen. The dressmaker was stocked with all the colors of this universe. Alara saw the excitement in her friend, Princess Alethea, and her sister Flora. The autumn ball was only a few weeks away. So this was a really great story, and the best point of it, I think for me, was the characters. Like, from the start, you knew who they were, and I know that I just read the first paragraph, and it names 3 people in that, and that can be really confusing. However, they're very quickly, each kind of described individually. You know who they all are, and they're very distinctive from each other, despite the fact that they're all like kind of royalty, all girls. They're different. However, I'm gonna go on and give a piece of criticism. So at the beginning of the story, I was just wondering where it was going because it didn't seem to really be going anywhere. At first, I know eventually we get to the ball in the first chapter and it makes sense. However, I feel like there should be other things interwoven with the character descriptions and the girls talking that fit more into a plot, introduce a problem earlier, so that there's something going on, because I was just kind of confused as to where the story was going. I love your world building of your places and the accents that the characters used. I have such a hard time coming up with, like, you know, expressions for a fantasy world or like the future, you know, new slang. You had no problem. I tried to say those two at the same time. You had no trouble coming up with new expressions for this world. It was really great. I also really love the short snapshot scenes that you gave because, you know, it starts where they're fitting and then they go and they're getting ready for the ball and then they go to the ball. There's no need to describe how they got from the fitting to the room or how they got from the room to the ball. There was no need to describe that, and luckily you didn't. I feel like the short scenes really worked, but once again, maybe weaving some plot into those short scenes would be a good idea. So another thing that I would advise for the story is to once again eliminate adverbs. I've already said this for another book, but as Stephen King says, adverbs line the gates of hell, and I agree. I have trouble with them too. I'm not perfect here, but eliminating adverbs here would be a good idea and I think would really improve the prose. The other thing is just the pacing of the story. Trust me, I really enjoyed most of the pacing. However, when it got near the end at the ball, I felt like it started to move a little too quickly. So I think that when they get to the ball, maybe just make some of the conversations longer. Make it clearer where everyone's going, what's happening. I think just slowing it down a little bit would improve it and make it a little less confusing. So let's read the first paragraph where they get to the ballroom because I feel like this paragraph is really great. Flora's heart leapt fast in her chest. The ballroom was beautifully decorated with red, gold, and orange leaves that hung from the domed ceiling and walls. The guests were dressed in autumn colors as well. Everyone but the royal family was. They wore purples and blues. Flora's dress was a bright yellow. It matched many other maidens' dresses, but that didn't bother her. For once it felt good to blend in. Our 9th entry is Night Storm by Flame Rider, and my throat is starting to hurt. I've been talking for a long time. Flame Rider asked me to read chapters 7 and 8 of their story, so I'm going to read the first line of chapter 7. The entire time walking, I could see the legend's shadow right behind me. It was hard to fight my instinct to attack him. I worked alone for years on end. His shadow reminded me of someone sneaking up on me. So we're going to go ahead and start by saying I love the relationship between the characters, especially the MC and the legend. The legend, I think is his name. Not much is said about the legend, and the legend doesn't say much because as far as I can remember, he does not talk at all in this story, but their relationship with one another is great. And it's shown through, you know, Legend's determination to keep the MC alive, and of the MC, you know, like, comforting Legend. I also like the other character you introduced, crap, I forgot his name. Greflin, that's his name. I also love the relationship between Greflin and the MC. It was just really funny. The best part of it was that you learned so much about Greflin and the MC and Legend through their interactions with one another, which were really funny. I'll give you an example right here of one of these. "Help or arrest?" he asked. His voice shook me out of my daze. On his lips was a thin smile. I couldn't help but smirk at his question. "Bit of both," I answered. Greflin chuckled, bowing his head. Legend crawled out of the tunnel, straightened to his full height. I looked at him and tilted my head. "Feel better?" Legend looked at me and nodded. I smiled and nodded before turning to Greflin. So yeah, you get to learn not only about their character relationships, but also about the characters themselves as they're interacting with one another, which was really well done. I also loved your action sequences. I thought they were really well described. And you know, I'm a sucker for action. And third of all, your world building. Loved the world building with the aliens and like the rankings of Legend and the MC and how they were equal somehow. I don't really get the whole ranking system, but I only read 2 chapters. But the way you just plunge the reader into the action to start, and you know, there's aliens attacking. It was just really nice, and you folded the world building in really well. Okay, so things I would fix. The number one biggest thing is the use of small words, which is something that I struggle with. Oh my gosh, do I struggle with this. You tend to overuse the words look, smile, nod. I'm not sure if I can give you much advice on this one because I'm struggling with the same things. However, finding synonyms for, you know, look, smile, nod, and also finding, you know, different ways to eliminate those words, I think would really help the story, because going through it, you're hearing these words over and over and over, and it gets repetitive really quick. Secondly, I feel like your pacing is a bit too quick, especially in Chapter 7. Chapter 8 was better. Chapter 7, the way that they're storming the fortress, it just happened really fast. I know that you want the action to just, you know, hit hard, make an impact. However, in this, it goes a little bit too fast, so if you just slow it down a little bit, add in some more descriptions, it won't take away from the action. But yeah, pacing is one of the hardest things to master in storytelling. Just work with pacing a little bit and try to figure it out. And the third thing, this is a small one. There are some places where you just you start a lot of sentences in a row with I, and so switching up the sentence structure and starting the sentences with other things other than, you know, I did this, I did this, I did this, would definitely help improve the story. But once again, just excellent plot and characters. I was entertained through the whole story. And our last submission of the day, thank gosh, because I need a drink of water and some food, is The Orphans of Sympathy by L.P. Fletcher. So L.P. Fletcher also has a Twitter account, and you should go follow him there, as well as on Wattpad, of course. So this was a story submitted kind of later in the process than the others, so I only got a chance to read chapter 1 of this one, which is a very short chapter, but still, I'm going to talk about it because I thought it was an amazing first chapter. Let's read the first paragraph of this story. He crept along the woodland floor, his primitive bow and obsidian-tipped arrow held out in front of him. The moss underfoot was a soft carpet, perfect for hiding his steps as he searched for prey. Let's talk about the first thing in this story that was amazing, and that was your showing. I am impressed. I'm going to give an example with this short 2-paragraph sample here. The creature snapped its head up, its short ears pivoting and twitching. He was close enough to take a shot. Would the action of lifting the bow catch the eye of the alert animal? They both stood like statues, participants in a frozen chase. Hunter knew it was now or never. If the animal fled, he might not have the strength to follow. What was so cool about this story, and it really showed in what I just read, is the fact that you can say certain things without saying them. For example, in this you say, if the animal fled, you might not have the strength to follow. Through that quick description, we now understand that he's probably starving somehow or weak. He's not in a good situation here. Also, the line participants in a frozen chase paints a wonderful picture. You don't have to say, you know, Hunter was 3 feet away from the animal and, you know, he had his left foot sticking out, so it looked like he might be running. By saying participants in a frozen chase, you create a picture without actually having to physically type out an entire picture. Also, that ending. Woo-wee, that ending, I swear to gosh. So, I am a firm believer in plot twists, and I'm a firm believer that they can happen at any time in the story. Clearly, this person agrees with me on this one, because they end this chapter with him about to shoot the deer, and then all of a sudden there's an explosion, and you're like, yo. You're already throwing us for a loop. You're like, Buddy Boy is already starving, he's in the woods trying to catch some animals with this primitive thing. What world are they in? Like, are they in the past? And then all of a sudden, explosion. So once again, I only got to read the first chapter of this story, and it was really short, so I really only have one critique, and that is adverbs. I am on a conquest to just defeat adverbs. I'm not saying to any of the people that I gave adverb advice to that adverbs are 100% evil. They're like 99% evil. So just make sure you go through and you're eliminating words like he was very strong, they went quickly. There are just better ways to say those things. Everyone in the world should eliminate their adverbs. Just cut them. Cut them with a knife. Shank them. That's it. Thank you guys for coming around and watching Reviewing Your Stories Volume 2. What did we learn today? We learned that adverbs line the gates of hell, and shank your adverbs. Also, just pacing is a bitch. I can't deal with it. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fancy stuff, and if you want your story reviewed, I have a part 3. I don't actually think I have a date set for it yet. Never mind, I do. Reviewing Your Stories Volume 3 will be coming out on January 2nd. My deadline for submissions is December 18th. So if you want to submit to that, I'm gonna have a book up on Wattpad, or you can just email them to christinewriter@gmail.com. So just one more huge thank you to all the people who submitted. You are so brave. I am envious. I loved reading all your stories. Each one of them was so distinct. That's the thing about it. Like, I thought, you know, I have 10 stories here. They're gonna get confused. I'm gonna confuse all of them. I didn't. They're all so unique, you know? Like, it's just really cool. So a huge thank you to these brave individuals. All their links are down below, and to all the individuals who submitted, you should be getting full reviews within the next few days. And until then, may the gods of plot be ever on your side. I'm hungry. Goodbye. Our next submission comes from... Oh my gosh, my phone just had a conniption. Did you hear that? Good lord.